Alrighty. Good morning, everybody. Thank you all for being here. We appreciate you. It is a beautiful day, and I know that Energy Trust, or the Energy Trust reception is today, and I'm going to assume that a lot of people are really excited to be at the Energy Trust reception, but you all made it here, and we appreciate you. Today is the first of what we hope to be a bi-monthly series of workshops where we're going to try and take apart the CEAP. It is a very large document, and we want to break it down, recognizing that it has been several years since it began. There's been some updates, and more importantly, there's things happening in the community related to the CEAP and related to climate change and sustainability, and we'd like to highlight those. So this is the first one. We're focused on transportation to partner with Ashland Climate Collaborative, who has made this entire month about transportation. Before we get started, we want to do a land acknowledgement. As an organization based in the Rogue Valley, we gather here on the occupied land of the Lagawa, Shasta, and Tequilma people. In the 1850s, tribes were displaced due to the gold rush and colonialization of Southern Oregon. This brought war, starvation, genocide, and the erasure of local tribes. In 1853, the Rogue River Treaty was signed, where 3 tribes were forced to cede their land of the upper Rogue Valley and relocate to temporary reservations, the closest one being located at Table Rock. We recognize that we are on stolen land and will work to protect our community, the climate, and environment for future generations. Oregon is home to 9 federally recognized tribes. However, there are many more that do not hold this status. We hope that with this land acknowledgement, you will research the land you reside on, work with us to honor the original caretakers, and to protect our environment and community in the work we are doing. The link at the bottom you'll find in my signature if you get an email from me. It's a link that I stole from SOU, who also carries it in their signature lines, but it's an amazing resource for mapping not just Oregon, but historic tribal lands across the country. All right, so the agenda tonight, I'm going to be doing a brief history of the CEAP. And the idea here is to give an overview of what the CEAP is and a little bit of its background story. And then we have 2 guest presenters. We have Chad with the City of Ashland to talk about some updates, kind of what the city's doing since implementation. And then we have our partner, Sharon with the Ashland Climate Collaborative, who will be talking about what is happening on the ground. Because again, the ethos of this conversation was, let's educate about what the CEAP is, let's share about what the city is doing, and then let's talk about what partners are currently engaged in the work on the ground so you can get involved right away. Before we hop in though, we always do introductions, so turn to your neighbor and say hello and take a minute to talk about the CEAP. Do you know what it is? Have you ever heard of it? We'll take just a couple of minutes, have a conversation with the person sitting next to you.
Hi, I'm Rancy. Nice to see you too. Meet you, Sharon.
So it's been a month.
Yes, yeah. So you recall creating this?
Yeah, I'm glad I'm hanging in there.
No, yeah, I mean, so I know something about this. I don't know there's a short clip to it.
Yeah. I know, well, it changes.
It changes a little. Yeah, there's like, well, not really a short clip. That's fine. But chat about that. Yeah, hopefully, and some actual controversy as well as resources online and such. That's great.
Yeah.
So was the electrification thing you know what I want to talk about? Such as it is. Maybe I should. Yeah.
No, and then it would better off probably being, I have a tendency to restrict myself because I'm not confident yet. No, it's all there.
We didn't get to watch anything. And so, watch Mama Alliances, where you,
Yeah.
Sure.
We've been,
Yeah, it's such a dynamic group.
just because our
Well, you wouldn't be
14 is older.
I didn't even take it out. So, I did it always far too big.
And others were safer, you know. But we're getting some a couple of young people, like we're trying to relaunch. We're actually doing a program this Saturday.
Alrighty, we'll go ahead and bring us back together. Always the hardest part when I have to interrupt conversation. Perfect. I'm glad you all got the chance to chat with your neighbor. There's a little bit of community building that I think is always good to have at the beginning of any meeting. So we will go ahead and jump in if my clicker works. It does. So the origins of the CEAP, the Climate and Energy Action Plan that the city put forward starting way back in 2015. So in 2015, the city of Ashland took a bold step at the time to say we need a comprehensive plan to deal with the causes and consequences of climate change. So they began by putting together a citizens-based Climate Energy Action Plan Committee. This committee was a collaborative structure bringing together residents, nonprofit advocates, city staff, and technical consultants. This wasn't just government-led, it was community-guided. What followed was a series of open houses, public surveys, and workshops. These weren't just formalities, they were invitations. Residents helped identify priorities and concerns. People shared visions for a livable, sustainable Ashland, and those visions helped shape the plan structure and goals. As a note for longtime SOCAN people, we want to offer a remembrance for Louise Shawkat, who was a driving member back in 2015 and 2016 to get the CEAP implemented in its current form. She did much work, including attempting to run for city council when there was an open vacancy to help push the CEAP along. So we just want to offer and remember Louise. Critically, the CEAP was designed not to be a technocratic document, but a community vision, something that was built to live and breathe within Ashland and change over time as Ashland changed. As you can see, I highlighted a few of the community involvements. There was 3 open public open houses where people were encouraged to participate and work together to shape the CEAP. There was online surveys that had over 100 responses, and several different organizations worked to encourage engagement around the Climate and Energy Action Plan. There were several milestones in the adoption of the CEAP. So in June 7th, 2016, City Council would begin to hold study sessions on the CEAP. In November 2016, the final open house, and they started to review the documentation. Finally, in February 2017, the CEAP was presented to the City Council, and then in March 7th of 2017, it was officially adopted. At that moment, Ashland became a very early adopter as a city, having a comprehensive local climate action plan. And if you haven't had a chance to read the CEAP, it is a very comprehensive 60 to 80 pages. So it's a very, very intense document. There's a lot of really great actionable steps in there that we'll start to work through as we go through these monthly meetings. So the overall guiding vision of the CEAP was Ashland's goal for a resilient and sustainable future. And in particular, there's 6 focus areas within the CEAP. And that's what we're going to be highlighting throughout these series of meetings. You'll notice we're focusing on transportation, but to highlight the other 6 areas for a second, they all focus on different elements of greenhouse gas emissions. So building standards and energy is one of the sections that focuses on how do we make our buildings more energy efficient, how do we weatherize them, more importantly, how do we keep them fire safe as fire seasons grow incredibly more intense and more frequent. And we have transportation and land use. We'll be focusing primarily on transportation because land use is a whole other beast, and we've got plenty to talk about when it comes to transportation. With the city working on its transportation master plan, it's particularly relevant right now. Then we have consumption and materials, which is reducing waste, so composting, but also changing our purchasing habits and recognizing that when you buy that trinket doodad from China, it doesn't just get on a boat and end up here. It gets on a little truck to go to a distribution center, to get on a big truck to go to the port, to go on a ship, to go to another little truck, to go to another distribution center, to go to another truck, to go to another distribution center, to end up on your door. And there's a lot of emissions related to that $5 purchase you make. We also talk about natural systems, so biodiversity and restoration. Ashland does pretty well with its tree canopy, but there's a lot of room for improvement, particularly around fire resilience, which is a big topic as we head into the summer. Public health and safety, there are a lot of climate risks related to public health. From smoke, SmokeWise Ashland has been a great program so far, but there's a lot that we can do to talk about the effects of heat stroke and proper cooling and how do we keep our communities safe. Finally, cross-cutting strategies is a little bit of the everything else, but it's kind of the way I see it. It's the how do we educate more and how do we encourage people to go and do the work that the city can't do. So I think of a famous image of Bernie Sanders as mayor where he's in a ditch cleaning out garbage. How do we encourage people to just go and do the things that need to get done without necessarily needing to wait for an authority to say it's time to go do the thing? And then why it still matters. So there's a few reasons why it still matters, but particularly given where we are in 2025, I don't think I need to explain to everyone in the room, there are things happening. And the most important way we fight against those things that are happening is by engaging as community. So coming together to pick a common cause and common goals and work together as communities on local issues that we can have a large effect on. So that's why the CEAP still matters to me and why we should have these workshops to show us that we have this comprehensive plan as a city. How do we work together to accomplish these goals? And that is my piece. So I'll leave this up and let you take a look, take action today while we turn it over to the next speaker. You should be able to click twice.
Oh, that's me. Good evening, everyone. It's nice to be able to be here and discuss this, and I think we'll have some time for questions at some point later on, so whenever that's appropriate, we'll do those. I work for the City of Ashland. I'm the Climate and Energy Analyst. I've been with the city for about just over 2 years now, so I'm starting to know what I'm doing, or I think I am. Let me put it that way. So Daniel mentioned the CEAP is pretty vast. It has a lot of information, has a lot of detail. You could go through those bullets. 55 different emissions were measured. There's 22 goals laced throughout, not necessarily in a numbered line-itemed manner. 65 priority actions, 54 other actions. So there's a lot of different things going on. This is a nice colorful chart of what those emissions look like if you wanted to go on the website and do your own breakdown. And this image up here on the right, the pie chart's probably something you've seen before in the CEAP. That's one of the main organizing mechanisms for our emissions there. You can't have 55 pieces to a pie chart, so you have to break it down some way to make it digestible. But we're not going to get into all those details. You all might as you move through this process. If I think about the CEAP, really, you can distill it down to those two overarching goals. And I've paraphrased a little bit, but every one of those words is basically in the two main goals. We're trying to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, and we're trying to be more resilient from climate change impacts. Fast forward 8 years, and we're pretty much still doing the same thing, and that does not quite show up. We'll figure it out here. I can read it to you, but it's actually better this way. It's a bit of a reveal. So if you think about the city, we sort of silo ourselves into a few different areas. We have myself, I'm in the electric department. We have 3 staffers there who work on climate, energy, and conservation measures. We have Public Works who supplies some water efforts, water conservation efforts. And then on the other side, over on goal 2, I'd put the fire department, where they're more focused on forest resiliency, climate resiliency, fire adaptation. And if I had to say what's the one thing that we're doing for each goals, if you could read that dark color, I've sort of stolen this slogan from somewhere else. It says, electrify everything everywhere now. That's basically the bottom line of how we work on our carbon emissions. And then on the right side is the goal, which is prevalent in this community wildfire protection plan, is be wildfire ready. And that encompasses a lot of things as well. A brief note on that, the draft is out. It makes the CEAP look like a quick read. It's 500 and some odd pages. It is, if you want to dive into those pages, or at least the executive summary, comments are due by June 2nd. So have at it if you'd like. A lot of good information in there about the various ways we can be wildfire ready, and our community needs to be wildfire ready. It's dependent upon where you live, and we're right up against the hills in the dry west, so It's a no-brainer. I'm going to skip that bottom part. We can get to that, I think, a little bit later in a different way. So if we think back to what was going on before the CEAP, so green up there, 2017 is the adoption in the calendar year. I don't know if, do I have a laser? Did you equip me with a laser?
Yeah, it is
like the
in the
Sharks? Oh, I don't know. Austin Powers reference for anyone who didn't get that. 2017 is when we adopted the CEAP. We already had incentive programs happening. And you can see, if you look down at the very bottom tally, you can see conservation measures, which were primarily electric-based, versus fuel switching, which was moving from fossil fuels to electricity. And as we move through time, we see a shift into a much more fuel switching type of mentality, and that's depicted down here on this graph. So our focus has changed as the CEAP came on board. It changed how we allocate money at the city level, what we focus on, and what type of things we're going to do. And these are the primary incentives that we use at the city on the far left column there. And those are the biggest ticket items. There are a few others, but I didn't put windows and insulation, which we don't do a ton of anymore, in that column. So this is the crux of it. A lot of carrots that we use at the city level to get things moving forward and encourage people to do the right thing. And again, a really great transition to removing those fossil fuels, and that requires actual city dollars. We don't get support from Bonneville Power Authority to do fuel switching from electricity or from natural gas to electricity. So we have to spend that out of our own electricity budget. So when I was looking back at what we've been doing, and I read the CEAP a lot more thoroughly this past September, I was trying to figure out, I have to report, how are we doing as a city? And we hadn't had a report in a number of years because of staff, lack of full-time staffing. And so I was overdue to write something, and I wanted to dive in, and I wanted to understand it, and I wanted to reconcile what we were doing with what the CEAP says, and try to make those two things align, because the more I dove into the CEAP, the less it felt like some of the big picture items aligned. There was a little tweaking that needed to be done. And two of the biggest ones were actually highlighted in the CEAP itself. And sometimes it's not the document, right? The CEAP, it's the supporting greenhouse gas inventory support document that has the nuggets of wisdom in there. So if you go through all those documents, you realize the way we were tallying our greenhouse gas emissions was going to be an impossible task as listed. So we needed to look at it again. For instance, electricity, we couldn't green the entire northwest grid. That's what would be required of the city of Ashland. We have to focus on the electricity we purchase, which is BPA, and that's a low emission energy source. It just helps us focus on the items that we're going to be able to make the most local progress on. So I dug in and I sort of resorted things based on an emission area in my 2025 report that's out in draft form. It's hot off the presses in May 8th. And it's pretty clear. It's what we've been working on. Those areas where we have incentives, it's primarily decarbonization, right? It's kind of a no-brainer. Those are the things that we can affect and impact locally, reduce our local greenhouse gas emissions. And there are other areas that are a little bit harder to touch on and work through. Things like refrigerants. Technically, there's laws on the books for those. It's a big factor, but people still maybe let those release into the atmosphere when they switch out your refrigerants in your heat pump or your air conditioner, or they don't switch to the lower emission factor refrigerant when they're supposed to. So hard to work on, but still a very important thing, and we can help to try and ensure that the laws are followed at the local level. And then there are some things that weren't in the CEAP, like small engines. And we know that small engines, they burn fossil fuel typically, unless you've got the newer electric versions. And those weren't accounted for in the CEAP. It was hard to do that. So trying to pull in things that were missed. But for the most part, everything in the CEAP is still quite relevant. All those actions, all those ideas, all those goals, they can still all be dovetailed in here. Going back to the notion of electrify everything everywhere now, essentially that touches on natural gas, passenger vehicle transportation, electricity, other heating fuels, and small engines. So that electrification notion that's just taking over, it's basically the primary focus, it seems, that everyone's looking at. we have other issues and concerns like how green is our energy upstream. And we need to make sure our grid is green. But that's not something that the city can help its citizens do. It's something the citizens can help its state do. And maybe the city can talk to the state, but there are other policies at play here at a larger level. So how are we doing if we look at these primary focus areas? This is the way I envision a dashboard being on our website moving forward, something that captures our biggest emissions that we can impact and showing a trend. And we've got transportation represented by passenger vehicles at the bottom. We have natural gas in the blue in the middle, and then we have our electricity emissions at the top. And overall, we have a nice downward trend. And we'll go through each of those a bit, but that's what we want to see, trends moving downwards and trends that sometimes take a long time to develop. So let's jump into the first trend. Electricity, you can tell sort of what's going on here if you think about where our electricity comes from. It's hydropower. Hydropower fluctuates every year. If there's not enough hydropower, BPA has to purchase energy off of the grid. And so it's going to be less green energy, and the emissions that come from that electricity is going to fluctuate quite a lot. And you can tell that 2011 was a bit of a drought year. They had to purchase more open market electricity, and then we purchased our portion from them. So we had a spike in our emissions that year. But relatively speaking, our electric emissions are relatively low. Another area where Ashland has been very strong in is in adopting solar energy. This is a tracking of our watts installed at the city level. The orange bottom bar is annual installations in megawatts, and the top yellow is total megawatts, so cumulative. And we're at 6.5 megawatts installed solar in the city, and that's quite a lot. That comes out to, if you do the math, it's about 14,000 megawatt hours a year. And the city uses about 175,000 megawatt hours a year right now on average. So the goal is, let's get a megawatt a year for the next 25 years. That's going to put us close to 60,000 megawatt hours of locally generated solar power. So that's a really promising trend moving forward. Now, transportation, again, passenger vehicles is our proxy because passenger vehicles are the largest, 85% of vehicle miles traveled, and something similar in emissions. So we can do some deep dive into data, which we hadn't done in the previous CEAP, and use this to track trends and see how we're moving. And look to the chart to the left, and that's EVs as share of passenger vehicles. And you see that orange line, and Norway went through the roof, and it was 12 years from 0 to 80% adoption of new vehicles as EVs. So it can move very quickly. And this is a common trajectory for adoption of new technologies. Slow, 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 it goes through the roof and then tapers at the top. And we're going to hopefully see that in the inverse over here with our emissions, that it's going to go slow, 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 and then it's going to dive and taper. That's the goal. That's the trajectory. Alluding to other things going on in the world, this might be impacted greatly by federal and state policies. We have this Clean Cars 2, which is encouraging the adoption of EVs. We have a great federal tax incentive currently, so hopefully that continues and helps drive that curve in the direction that we want to see it. And then natural gas. Sometimes we need a stick in the room too, and we don't have good numbers on natural gas. The purple boxes represent averages because we don't have the data there. Hopefully that's coming forth with our ordinance we passed this year. They'll hopefully provide us with the data that we need so that we can look at and see if all of our work installing heat pump hot water heaters is helping to move the needle and draw those emissions down and put those into the electric grid where the emissions are much lower. So I'm mostly focused on the mitigation side of things as opposed to the CWPP and the fire department on the resilience side of things. But if we just focus on mitigation, most things will fit into these categories that we're working on at the city. Remove our fossil fuel use, improve our energy efficiency, enable electrification readiness. And this is an area of concern right now. If your hot water heater goes out or your furnace dies, what are you going to do? If you don't have the panel set up and the wiring set up in advance, you're probably going to plug in what you had before because you need hot water, you need heat. So we're looking at an electric ready incentive that we hope to roll out if we can get approval for that. And that will allow people to do their panel upgrade or a circuit upgrade so that when that item fails, it will be able to be replaced with an electric one. So they'll be all electric ready and ready to move. Talked about increasing our local renewable production, and then storage. That's the next frontier, right? And the cool thing about the transportation is that's our storage. The grid to home, that's the next frontier. Two-way chargers, all these batteries parked in your driveway, able to help with outages or potentially curbing peaks, right? We have a 85, or excuse me, it's between 5 and 8 in the evening, August, you know, it's 110, everyone turns on their AC. If we have those batteries, we can maybe help mitigate that curve a bit. And so that's the next frontier, hopefully coming soon with those vehicle-to-home chargers. We got to reduce our waste and rethink our consumption. I think Daniel said it more eloquently than I could regarding all those various mechanisms of how that little doodad gets from manufacturing into your home. And then outreach and education. There are those areas like the consumption. We can't really do something from a city saying, hey, don't buy that. But we can say, this is what happens if you do buy that. So the outreach and education component needs to run through everything that we do, especially those areas that are difficult to tackle. So that's the end of what I prepared for y'all today.
Well, Chad, if you want, I think we can just do questions now, if there's any to...
Sure.
Do you have any questions for Chad? And we have a talking stick, so...
Oh, that's...
This is called ingenuity, and also, and a little bit of whimsy, so...
That's great.
Cool. All right.
Some hard-hitting ones. Throw them out there. Friendly crowd tonight.
Yep, being very gentle with you. Maybe they're intimidated by the talking stick. Oh, there's Alan.
Okay.
You have to use it.
When we talk about the energy for Ashland coming from hydropower, it's not really the case, is it? It's an offset. So Ashland is using energy from the grid, and then that's being offset by buying for the grid energy from Bonneville.
If we're talking about which electrons go to your outlet,
Yes.
that is one way to think about it. It's but if we think about what electricity we're buying, and it's sometimes we have to work with artificial constructs like time.
It wasn't meant to
money.
be a criticism, it was just a clarification, by the
Well,
way.
I think genuinely speaking, our town is situated closer to other power plants. I think that's the answer, right? So the electrons that get here are probably dirty electrons.
And we offset them.
I don't know that we offset them, but yeah, it's a bit of semantics perhaps, but we do purchase the clean energy because more out of good fortune than anything. It's just the way the Power Act was created, and we have the benefit of creating those. We technically don't buy the environmental benefits of that clean power because that's an extra charge. It's been monetized as a secondary sale.
You got at least one hard-hitting question.
I'm not sure I answered it, so.
You said that we don't have records for natural gas consumption in the last, what, 3 or 4 years or something?
Yeah.
Really? I mean, this is a known quantity.
Tell me more.
Is it proprietary that Avista doesn't share
It is not written into their contract that they have to.
the amount of gas that they sell?
Yeah, that's true. You could theoretically do some backwards math and try to figure out, based on the franchise payments, adjusting for the rate increases that can happen sometimes multiple times per quarter, it gets fuzzy. So it's,
If we know everyone's bills, yeah.
yeah. So it doesn't, in my mind, it doesn't change the work. Let's just assume it's that static 10-year average.
Yeah, sure.
And then work on and get the numbers and try to check on progress.
So here's a more fun question then. Are there any mechanical techniques that are being pursued for energy storage?
Well, when you say mechanical, I think of pumped hydro or gravity batteries.
That sort of thing? Yeah.
No, not to my knowledge.
Okay.
It's
Got all these
they're
hills.
expensive. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
It's, you know, you remind me of sometimes we're faced with interesting choices when we confront climate, and it's like, do we want protected bike lanes, or do we want escape routes without bollards, or do we want low water plants, but those low water plants might have more oily resins and they're more likely to catch on fire? It feels like climate has just created harder choices all the time. And so, to your point, do we create piping and pump back up into the hills and disrupt our fish to have stored water? You know, it's one of those questions. It's not getting any easier.
Yeah. Flavia?
Okay, so I have two questions. I'm more familiar with CPAC, but I also understand that there's a transportation committee for Ashland. And I've never attended those meetings, but if you could tell me a little bit what their activities are all about, I'd appreciate it. And then also, there's an EV club in Southern Oregon, and I don't know much about them either. And I just wanted to know how they participate in this sector of transportation.
Yeah, so to the first question, so there's a Transportation Advisory Committee, and their biggest single job is probably to prepare and review the transportation system plan, which is how the city allocates funds in a capital improvement plan to spend it on streets, sidewalks, bike paths, those type of improvements. And it's a mandatory state process, and they do a lot of reading, and there's a lot of review and analysis of options, sidewalk widths, bike path areas. And Sharon might get into that. I don't know. She might know more about it. I stay as far away from that as I can, just because I feel like I have enough acronyms already. Speaking of acronyms, SOHEVA is the Electric Vehicle Club. And I don't know that SOHEVA is involved with the TAC at all. I've met and presented to them and spoken with them, and so they're a great club to advocate for the adoption of EVs. And yeah, I don't know. Yeah, they go to a meeting. They're fun. They're at El Paradiso over on the other side of town.
All right. Perfect.
Okay, one more question.
Talk
Sorry.
this way.
Sorry. I know that, I guess a few years ago, there was a decision made that all departments or all the committees in their planning, they had to consider climate change in their decision-making. So how's that going?
I think there are two administrative rules that the city adopted. One is about fleet, and the other is about building maintenance. So trying to adopt, and the fleet policy goes even down to things like lawnmowers. So it's in mechanical equipment. So they try to adopt whenever they can. Has it been perfect? No, I don't think it's been perfect. Have they been doing a pretty good job? Yeah, we've seen an uptick, and I'm going to do a deep dive in the next year as to what the city's numbers look like. How many EVs are we adopting each year? We probably have 15 to 20 EVs and chargers for our city fleet at this point. And then the second administrative policy would be relating to city buildings. So when a city building needs to replace a piece of equipment, they're supposed to move to electric, if they can, away from fossil fuel consumption. And we have a city analysis underway right now, should be finalized this summer, I understand, that's going to talk about which buildings we should use. There might be some movement for the city employees, and how they will change out systems. So it's a tiered system, like a 1 through 5. If it's a state of 5, it means that thing could go any day. We need to be ready. You need to do the electrical work in advance so that you can replace it, sort of electric ready for the city, if you will. But there hasn't been great tracking. There was another policy called Carbon Note that wasn't officially adopted to do a little bit more carbon analysis on each city action.
All right, perfect. We appreciate it, Chad, and we'll go ahead and introduce our next speaker. Do the ceremonial mic swap
Thunderstorm.
as I hold the talking stick, so I am allowed to talk during this period. Let Sharon equip her new microphone while I pull up the notes. Alrighty. Sharon, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Is it going to come up? Oh, you're going to get it. So my name is Sharon Dorman. I'm on the board of the Ashland Climate Collaborative. Flavia's on one of our teams. We have 5 teams that are all focused on climate action that you can take, and our goal is to help the residents of Ashland take climate action any way they can. So we have compost, we have electrification, we have water, we have transportation, which is Streets for Everyone, and then we have climate clubs as well. So we're trying to get people in neighborhoods to get together and talk to each other and get ideas from each other and build resilience in your neighborhoods. So Streets for Everyone, our big move is transportation. Our goal is to try to help people get out of their cars any way that they can. We want safer streets. We want a bike and pedestrian network in the city so that people feel like they can get anywhere in the city without having to get into their car. So our vision is that because a ton of pollution is caused by gas-powered vehicles, we would like people to get out of their cars, and luckily there are a lot of options to do that. And Ashland is already making it easier to get out of your car. So some of the ways that Ashland is making it easier to get out of their car is putting in new bike improvements. So you've seen some of these on Ashland Street. You have bike boxes that make it safer for bikes to get out in front of cars at the intersection, protected bike lanes along Ashland Street, and more of those will be going in with the painted green, so they're really easy to see. We have a bicycle benefits program where you can get discounts at the stores. If you come in and you have a bicycle benefit sticker on your helmet, different stores in Ashland will give you a discount. These are, the co-op was the main one that was doing it for a long time, but now if you go to the ashlandclimate.org website and go to the transportation page, you'll get a whole list. They're now at the Growers Market, there's Scout, there's Piccadilly, I think, is going to be doing it. Handlebar, Sauce is doing it now. So it's a really cool program. We're going to try to grow that program and just give people more reasons to get out of their car. As we've been talking about already, the transportation system plan is going to be getting their big update this summer, and so that's another way that you can get involved and give feedback to the city about what you want. We have parades on our streets already, so ways to get out of the car when there are no cars on the street at all. You can take a bus. You can use the Central Bike and Walking Path. There are streets in our town that are they're not really great for cars because they're small and they're dirt, so lots of places to walk. We have bike buses for kids, and we have school buses as well. But we could do more. So these are some examples of towns that are already doing a lot to make their transportation easier for bikers, rollers, and walkers. So this is San Luis Obispo, and you can see they've created the protection here with planters, but they also have the curb there, and they have the green paint where there's a driveway or another road that comes through. In Miami Beach, this is an example of a walking street. This is not dissimilar to what we have downtown, but we could do more of it. These are nice, smooth pathways that are good for people who have disabilities or for small children. There's no cars at all. Makes it a really nice, pleasant place to hang out. Missoula, Montana is a very climate-friendly town, and they have an electric fleet of buses, so maybe someday RVTD will be able to do that for us as well. Fargo, North Dakota is known as a very walkable city, and so some of the things that they've done is make a very wide sidewalk, so that's really nice for pedestrians. They have a visible barrier here between the cars and the people, so that helps people designate where the cars are and where the people are. And then the cars park at an angle, which makes it easier for them to see when they're pulling out if there are obstacles in their way. It also makes it easier for pedestrians to get out of the way or to see them coming in. San Francisco has implemented a huge number of slow streets since the Bicycle Coalition started advocating for safer streets, and this is one of the nice things. It's so cheap to do. You have these bollards that are staggered across the intersection, so it forces the cars to slow down because they have to turn around the bollards. Some people have obviously put in extra barriers there, and then you have these really cheap little signs that remind people that these are slow streets. They did a lot of this during COVID because they realized how much people enjoyed having quieter neighborhoods all over the city. In Seattle, they've started taking parking lots and transforming them into housing. Why we have create more housing for cars in our country than we do for people, and we can change that by changing those parking lots into housing. And this is another example in Wichita, Kansas, where they actually took a parking garage and turned it into an apartment building. But this isn't enough. The city can't do everything. We have to help them with this chore of making Ashland a better place to get out of your car. And so what are the things you can do? You can speak up. The transportation plan is going to be started this summer. They're working on hiring a consultant, and then they're going to start having public meetings where people can come and give feedback about what they want in their city. And then you can take small steps. There's lots of things that people can do. I own a car, and I'm not opposed to cars, but everyone can take one small step to make cars, to use our cars less. So you can do one errand by bus or by bike or by walking. You can help a kid get into a bike bus or take a carpool or ride the school bus. You can support those bicycle benefits businesses and let them know that we want more of that. You can volunteer with us. We have lots of things that we need to get done. And involve your community. The research shows that people do more based on their peer group or their neighborhood. When you see a neighbor doing something, you're more likely to do it too. So involve your families, involve your friends, involve your neighbors. That's how we'll get people out on the street using those bike infrastructure or new sidewalks once they come. And this is the hard part. We do need funding. The city desperately needs funding to be able to transform our town. And so we do need to be able to support some of those things, even though it costs us money. And some of those ideas that are being floated are gas tax, paid parking. We don't charge for parking downtown, which a lot of towns could make a lot of money if they did that. We could keep the food and beverage tax. We could have utility fees. And then this one would be a one-time payment from ODOT if we took over some of the streets that they still maintain in our town. And then we can prioritize people over cars. This is just an example of what Seattle did around Westlake. After 1 year of this bike lane opening, the bicycle usage doubled. And it's just such a nicer, you can still have the cars, but then you can have space for people to walk and bike as well.
Well, thank you very much. I think we're ready for questions for Sharon. As I try and fix the talking stick subtly. Alrighty. No equally hard-hitting questions? Not as brutal as with Chad? All right. You just wanted to hold the talking stick.
It's mostly the novelty of this stick. So if your news feed is anything like mine on my phone, I feel like I'm being given a lot of articles recently about people, or cities rather, taking out bike paths or bike lanes. And I'm curious if you have any thoughts or talking points, or if Streets for Everyone is developing any thoughts or talking points about some of that information. It seems like we're backsliding potentially as far as developing bike lanes when I see these articles. Maybe it's not true, but it's concerning to see those, and I agree we need more in Ashland. So
I don't know if I have a good answer for that. I can think about a couple examples of towns that have taken them out. They were experiments. Like in San Francisco, Valencia Street is a big corridor, very commercial, lots of restaurants and cafes and bookstores and furniture stores and whatever. And during COVID, they took out the island and they striped a bike path down the center. But what they found is that it actually was more dangerous, trying to weave bikes into the center of the road rather than keeping them on the side. I drove through last summer, and the barriers were all banged up, and you could tell that like cars were crashing into it and stuff like that. So I think they're taking those out because they just realized it wasn't safe. And I think in Medford, they've been talking about doing something similar for perhaps a similar reason.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, is because when you drive down, I think it's Main Street or Jackson Street in Medford, it's got the bollards up and it's like, wow, this is great. How come they got there first before Ashland did? And so I don't know how they accomplished that, but I don't have any visibility into what their plans are for it.
Well, the state does the state does require, I think, Gary Schaff, our the chair of Streets for Everyone, has those statistics at the ready, but the state does require improvements for bike infrastructure at the state level. And so I think it's just up to the different municipalities to figure out how they're going to spend those dollars. But yeah, I couldn't tell you why Medford was moving on that faster. I do know that Ashland will, the Public Works will add more as we do repaving projects. So that's why Ashland Street got some. That's what's happening on North Mountain. And I think B Street, right, is part of that. So those streets that were already slated to be repaved or to have improvements will get bike infrastructure at the same time.
I can add on to the Medford comment. The reason Medford got them downtown was they were required to do something for the climate-friendly, equitable areas. They had a few sites selected, and I'll be candid, I think they chose the easy route of just, let's slap some bike lanes downtown, and it satisfied most of the state requirements, just having those in. And then they got a grant to accomplish that. In terms of the backsliding, there is a massive amount of complaints. And to piggyback on your talking points, when I'm feeling particularly facetious, usually those comments are, I can't fit my gigantic truck downtown, and that's why I'm really upset. And the answer should always be, maybe don't drive a super souped up 9-foot tall monster truck downtown, because we don't need them downtown. Maybe park a little ways away and walk or bike or take an electric scooter or rollerblades or a skateboard or a really powerful husky that can pull you along. Like, there's a lot of options that are not super gigantic trucks. That's usually where I go to. But all right. Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if your group works with merchants, particularly Main Street merchants, and providing some sort of infrastructure for bikes to park. And I know that the little stickers and everything, that's a great idea. And I don't know how many Main Street merchants do, but that's a difficult place to park and shop. And also, well, I should have asked Chad about any talk about changing Main Street altogether. I know the one-way thing was a big deal, and now, I know there's talk in the past about closing it off and making it a pedestrian walkway, but that's not probably going to fly. But what about, bike racks and things like that?
So the last year, the Transportation Advisory Committee did a survey of places in the town that needed improvement, including bike racks. And so Streets for Everyone helped participate in that and gave feedback to them about that. So that's definitely, hopefully going to be part of the transportation plan, or maybe, I don't know if that would be part of the capital improvements, or it's definitely in the system plan update is to give more bike racks downtown. We would love to close downtown to cars. I don't know that other people would like that. But we are trying to do things to, like the block party that was 2 weekends ago was our idea of just getting people used to the idea of closing off streets more often. We would love to have Winburn closed off temporarily, maybe on First Friday, to give, just like they did in San Francisco, they started blocking off part of Golden Gate Park on Sundays, and now it's all the time. So there are cities doing different things like that to help people actually get to participate in a part of town with no cars. I think making it visible and something that you can participate in, and then you can see that it's not horrible and it doesn't cause a great inconvenience, then people will be more likely to go for it when you want to get more dramatic And
Just to piggyback on that, just an observation about San Francisco. At every point when they've ripped down an ugly freeway or made things go slower, there's been horrible shouts of protest, and what they've done a pretty good job of putting in beauty. And most recently, the Great Highway, which was an extremely ugly highway right on the water. I mean, who thought about that? They've closed off a large part of that now, and there's some protests. But overall, people by now, they're just used to it. They know they're going to get used to it, and they know they're going to love it. So
yeah. I mean, there are so many examples of places all over the world that are being transformed from parking lots or freeways into more beautiful spaces that you can still drive through, but it's just not the main purpose of that area. The purpose of the area is for people, which is really nice.
Mm-hmm. Thanks very much. Which side? Where is it? Got it. I got it, I think. Okay, I know your focus is in Ashland, but of course Ashland doesn't exist in isolation from the rest of the state. And you're probably aware that at the state level there's a transportation package that's being put together. Are you following that at all?
Personally, no.
Okay, because
I'm sure Gary is. He's kind of our policy wonk.
Okay, it's the problem that the state has, probably most folks know this, is the funds for highways come from gas tax, largely, a few other things, but mainly gas tax. And because the gas tax has been static for decades, and because even internal combustion engines are becoming more efficient and therefore using less gas, and because there's a statewide push, not surprisingly, to encourage folks to buy electric vehicles, the income to fund Department of Transportation is dropping, relative certainly to inflation. And so there's an effort this session to come up with a package to overcome that, which might result in folks being charged for the miles they drive or something like that, which is probably an unfortunate requirement. But there is a Republican proposal to establish a climate protection program, which would put a fee on carbon to fund highways. I'm getting too close? Okay, thank you. So I'm just wondering if folks in Ashland are paying attention to this, because it's liable to have an impact on what you guys are doing.
Yeah, once you described it to me, I did remember that, like the problem with ODOT not having enough money to fund these projects. I mean, we're following it. I mean, I think anybody who's interested in climate is trying to follow what the state is doing and to give feedback to them as much as we can. It's just not the main purpose of the Ashland Climate Collaborative. We're really focused. I mean, obviously what the state's doing affects us, but what we want to do most of all is to help people here feel empowered and educated and motivated to do the changes that we can do regardless of what the state does. So if we want a really beautiful biking network or pedestrian network in Ashland, we'll definitely need money from the state to do that. But I think we can get creative here as well. I mean, just like, for instance, the parking meter thing. LA, San Francisco, a couple other places have implemented parking meters that are based on, what's the word I'm thinking of? Like the price goes down as the usage, as the price goes, it's like a supply and demand. If there's more cars coming in, the price goes up. And when the tourists leave on the Sunday, on Monday, the prices come back down for the local, So things like that we could look at that would make it easier to live here, wouldn't tax us as much, but could bring in revenue from the tourism industry. So things like that we could do. And I think that's what ACC is more focused on.
Mm-hmm. And to tie that back in, I think it was the last suggestion you had about the ODOT us taking over the streets from ODOT. The main strip downtown heading southward is ODOT. That's why it's kind of hard to, coordinate parades and things, because we have to get ODOT permission in order to shut that road down. But I mean, talk to people, push for that. That is something that if the city wanted to, they could have that street and it wouldn't be ODOT's anymore.
Then we could stripe the whole thing.
Perfect. All right. Last questions? Perfect. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate you coming down to have a conversation with us.
Yeah.
And thank you, Chad, for having a conversation. Can I get a round of applause? All right. And look at us with our peak efficiency. So I think I will call it a day, except we do have Mr. Allen, who had one final announcement about Senate Joint Resolution 28.
Oh, yeah, well, actually, I think I've got most people.
Oh.
So
Well, for the
I'll just say,
recording.
just say it very quickly. Flavia, I have a form for you to fill out. Okay, what I'm pushing, and I've talked to everybody about trying to get a constitutional amendment in Oregon to give Oregonians the right to a healthy environment. And as several folks have said, yes, Montana is what it's all about. Our Children's Trust, you may recall, filed suit against the state to try and get the state to behave itself. And this was turned down at the appeals court level because the claim was there is nothing in the Constitution that guarantees Oregonians the right to a healthy environment. There's nothing actually in the federal Constitution that guarantees Americans the right to a healthy environment. It's in the preamble, but it's not real. And so what we're trying to do is to get that into the Constitution. And so it's possible, it will be possible then for individuals who are feeling that the agencies are not doing their job in protecting the environment to file suit against the agencies. So that's what it's all about, and I think I've got everybody but Flavia, who hasn't filled the form out yet, and I haven't got one from Dale, but thank you, everybody.
All right. Well, we appreciate you all being here for our first inaugural workshop, and we will see what happens in 2 months from now. Perfect. Cheers. Oh,
Can I make a small announcement?
of course. As long as you have the talking stick.
All right, thank you. So I'm offering this class on June 12th at OSU Extension, and it's called Thriving Together, Spotlight on Our Local Food System. And the description is, we all participate in our local food system as consumers of food and managers of the resulting byproduct, which is food waste. Learn different strategies to positively impact our food system from beginning to end. This includes how we shop, to reducing food waste, to managing the food waste that we do create. So that's it. So I have the flyer here if you want to sign up.
All righty. Thank you much. And thank you all again for being here. We appreciate you, and we will see you in July.